Hello and Happy New Year! Welcome to Become the Teapot. I'm Ian.
And so am I.
So, Ian, it's the new year. Got any resolutions for 2022?
Well, yeah, actually I do. As you know, it's Ryanuary.
Not a real word.
And we're going to be watching films featuring one of my favourite superheroes, Deadpool, all month long.
That's right, as well as getting you to read some of the comics that they're based on.
So my New Year's resolution is to be more like Ryan Reynolds.
Be more like Ryan Reynolds. Okay, so you're planning to star in a bunch of middle-of-the-road action comedies.
Maybe, but I'll also be getting a Peloton bike, a PJ watch, supporting Wrexham FC, and switching my mobile plan to Mint Mobile.
That might be difficult. I don't think it's available in this country yet.
Hey, no one said becoming Ryan Reynolds would be easy. I'll also be exclusively drinking aviation gin.
I don't think it's a good idea to only drink gin, but okay. What's your end goal here?
Well, I figure it will be a rough start.
Yeah, you probably won't even be recognisable as Ryan.
But with maximum effort and some time...
About 7 years or so?
I'll get it right, and people will soon come to see me as the Ryan Reynolds they know and love.
Okay, sounds good. On an unrelated note, this week we'll be watching X-Men Origins Wolverine from 2009, and reading Marvel Comics Presents Weapon X by Barry Windsor-Smith, as well as Origin by, deep breath for this one, Bill Jemas, Paul Jenkins, Joe Quesada, Andy Kubert, and Richard Isanove.
That's a whole lot to cover.
Then we better get started.
Cue the music. So, we've mugged off this film for such a long time now. I think even in our first episode, which, if you've listened to it, we must only apologise for the sound quality. So, it's about time that we thought we'd cover it. Ian, do you want to get us started? Where do you want to begin with this?
Okay, yeah, I'll get started. It's bad.
Right, should we move on to the comics?
Yeah, let's do it. No, it's so stupid, this film. Like, it's just, watching it is bafflingly bad. This came out, right, 2009, so the year after Iron Man and The Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. Like, compare it to those as films and see how incompetent it actually is.
Yeah, it is. It's such a slow film. There are action scenes, but they're not...
There's action throughout, but it's just nonsensical.
Yeah, it's not worth the wait, is it? It's really boring. The opening montage, I think, is great. The first sort of fighting through the wars thing, I would love to see that as the main plot as the film. Or in the film, even. I just don't understand why they didn't use it as the main plot.
Well, I mean, I don't think it would have been that interesting. It would have been just a montage of people fighting in various wars. For some reason, a couple of Canadians fighting in a bunch of American wars. It wouldn't make much for a film, I don't think. It wouldn't be the most interesting arc. It's not the most interesting thing about Wolverine. They've also, they seem to have made him even older in the film than he was in the comic for some reason, so he could fight in the Civil War in America, but... I don't know. It was okay. I think it's a good intro, even if it was one of those things where you're watching it going, well, you've not framed the D-Day landings. You've framed the D-Day landings as seen in Saving Private Ryan. So this actually looks like at some point Sabretooth and Wolverine went and starred in Saving Private Ryan rather than actually stormed.
Or Saving Private Ryan Reynolds, keeping it on topic.
Good. Yeah. That... Definitely something. It's something we can work with.
That's
there,
words
I'm sure.
there. Yes, you've said words.
Yeah.
I know that you're going to moan here, but I reckon the first 15, 20 minutes aren't actually that bad. It starts becoming a bad, boring film when there's a 6-year time jump to the Canadian, whatever they are, in the Rockies or mountains or whatever. That's when he becomes a cigar token, flannel shirt wearing lumberjack.
Yeah, and I would say it gets bad before that. I would say, to be honest, the bit where they go into that facility as the group of them and they all exhibit their powers, but their powers seem very nebulous. They all seem to have some form of agility. That seems to be Deadpool's main power, or Wade's main power, is that he is agile, I would say.
Yeah.
He's quick. I don't really know what his power. You can cut bullets in half with swords, which is impossible.
It looked pretty cool, though.
It looks ridiculous. I like how they, we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks' time. I think in Deadpool 2, isn't it? They take the piss out of that scene where he does it again and then just gets shot a whole bunch.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then going even further back, right at the beginning of the film, the young child, that really sort of truncated version of what we see in Origin, the comic book, which we'll discuss later. But with none of the subtlety or nuance. And it doesn't make any sense because then the gardener, Logan, says, "Oh, he's not your dad, I am." Despite the fact that his dad looked exactly like Hugh Jackman. So, I don't know how those genetics work. This man was clearly lying to you.
I completely forgot that Wolverine and Sabretooth were actually brothers. I seem to recall that they were metaphorical, but then...
like brothers in arms.
Yeah, but then that scene, they were like, "No, I'm your father." I'm like, "Oh, I'll be watching Star Wars?" Like, what's going on?
Well, they kind of merged it, because obviously in the comic that isn't the case. And, they've got many years of history. And at one point, I believe the intent was for Sabretooth to actually be his... I can't remember which way around it was. Either Sabretooth being his father or his son. I think it was his father, because he would always show up on Wolverine's birthday and beat him up.
Happy birthday, son.
Yeah, but they sort of combined his character in the film with Dog Logan from the comics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, by far the least of this film's problems is the relationship between those two. I think it's one of the better things in a way, but I mean, that is very much damning with faint praise.
What you were saying there about the first time that the little team, is it Team X or whatever they're bloody called, when they first meet, I got very strong sense that it felt like Suicide Squad, the first one, that it had that kind of feel to it, which is not a good thing. I mean, I've gone on record to say that film is average at best.
Yeah.
You obviously hate it.
I think it's rubbish. I think it's terrible.
Yeah, I was watching it thinking, I'm getting a sense of Suicide Squad, and that's not a good thing. Uh-oh.
I would say it is comparable to this film, Suicide Squad. What it felt like to me, those Task Force X ones, is Task Force X, or is that actually the Suicide Squad? I think that is actually.
That's
anyway,
Suicide.
Anyway, those guys, I got the feeling that, well, they are in the comics, but there's a lot going on in this film, and I get the feeling it's that usual Fox thing that they did with every one of their films, which is, go on, put a few more mutants in.
Yeah.
Go on, can you put a few more in? Go on, put a few more recognisable ones in. Put Blob in, but Blob's not on the suit. Put Blob in. Oh, okay.
Oh, you mean put in Bub?
Oh yeah, Bub. And then obviously throwing in characters like Cyclops for no apparent reason, and Emma Frost, except it's not Emma Frost.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, actually, we've got a bunch of characters from the comics who aren't really important enough to be given personalities in this film before they're promptly killed off. But shall we go through some of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems fair.
So, I mean, I'll start with will.i.am.
That took me a second.
I mean, it's saying a lot for your film when will.i.am is not the worst thing about it.
Yeah.
He hasn't done much acting since. He is not a great actor, but otherwise is fine. And that is all I have to say about his character. You?
I've got written down that his name is John. That's it.
It's true.
That's all I've got on him, is the fact that he's called John.
John Wraith.
He teleports.
Yeah, he does teleport. In the comics, he's got loads of different code names. His name's John Wraith. Supposedly, I looked this up, they went with Kestrel in this film, but I don't remember that being mentioned.
No.
Right, next up, his best mate, apparently, Blob, or Bub.
Yeah.
So in the comics, Blob's enormous size and weight is a result of his mutation.
Yep.
Which made him very large and also immovable. And the immovable Blob, that is his primary power. In the film, Blob's power is that he's strong, and the joke is that he got fat.
Yeah.
Haha, fat people are funny.
Well, they were in 2009, 8, whenever this film bloody came out.
The distant past of 2009, yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it, because when he's not become the Blob yet at the start of the film, we don't know that he's strong. He doesn't do anything. He just stands there and...
He punches a tank.
Oh, yeah, he does. He punches the tank. Yeah,
That's quite a feat of strength, that, yeah.
I forgot about that. I literally watched this on Friday and I forgot about that. Just to put that into perspective, we are recording on a Sunday, so that's 2 days of me forgetting the start of the film. Yeah, and then later on, John says that he's got an eating disorder. That's why he's now huge.
Yeah, that's also funny, is eating disorders.
Yeah, well, his tattoo of that thin sailor bird sort of turned into like a fat person, and Logan makes a joke out of it.
The whole thing is played for laughs, is that, oh, look at this fat guy. And then he's killed off screen by Sabretooth.
Oh, yeah.
He says, oh, your friend Blob's dead. Oh.
Cool, thanks. He also sounds like, I want to say it's Wild Wild West, but it's probably not his best known role. There's a guy in it that's got that weird sort of, I don't know, it's like he's got something in his mouth, and the way that Blob speaks, it's the same thing, and I can't remember the actor's name, but it's just that weird southern kind of accent, but it's like he's got two balls.
Is that Kevin Kline in that? I don't know.
No, it's not his. It's one of the bad guys. I think that he's got the ear thing.
That's Kevin Kline, wasn't it, in that film? And he had the big robot legs.
Oh yeah, no, he was in that film, but Kevin Kline was the was his sidekick, wasn't it?
Oh, you might be right. I can't remember.
I don't know. But yeah, the bad guy in that had the weird ear thing and the earwax thing, that actor, he's played a couple roles and he has a sort of southern kind of accent, but it does sound like he's got something inside his mouth. And they've used that for Blob as well. He's like, oh, you're always so funny, Logan. They've added that in for no reason to try and give him some backstory. I don't know.
Well, I think I think he might be southern in the comics. So being southern is, you know, I suppose part of it. Was Kenneth Branagh was Dr. Lovelace. Oh. But anyway, it probably isn't important. We're not going to cover that film. Should we move on to another character? How about Kayla Silverfox? And again, had to look her up to find out what her name was. Mm-hmm. So this is Wolverine's Native American partner, played by non-Native American Lynn Collins. Mm-hmm. She has different powers than her comic book counterpart, which I think is healing.
Right.
But here she has some sort of, again, nebulous mind powers that were either emotional manipulation or also just plain telling people what to do and they would do it. Mm-hmm. So,
and through the clothes as well. It's not even like skin contact. It's just through his jeans.
But she did have to touch them, but not obviously that closely.
Yeah.
And then she's also in this film, for some reason, Emma Frost's sister.
Yep.
Who is presumably therefore named Emma Silverfox rather than Emma Frost. So it's not Emma Frost, despite having the same powers. And she is, of course, too, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Native American. Take it away. Deconstruct that.
I don't want to touch that at all. Yeah, I mean, I don't get that character at all, because the idea that Stryker's sent her away to go keep tabs on Logan and whatever, because he's got her sister held captive.
Yes.
But why didn't she just use her powers on him and be like, can you set my sister free, please?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Done.
If it had kept up the whole, like, she can alter emotions, that would make sense. But right at the end of the film, she just straight out tells Stryker to walk until his feet bleed, and he does it.
Yep.
So it changes that character's power set entirely to a point where she could have just gone, give him back. I suppose she couldn't use her powers on Sabretooth, so maybe he was kept around as an enforcer, but presumably there were times when he wasn't about, when he was going around killing Merry from Lord of the Rings and things like that. It was, yeah.
Well, because you've just said his name, do you want to talk about Bradley?
Yeah, sure. That is as much as I have to say about that character. He turns on and off a light bulb and then he gets killed. You?
Yeah, I've put it's the guy from Lost.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it.
Good. Remember that was big back in the day, wasn't it? Lost.
Yeah.
Big get at the time. Not so much nowadays.
Actually, yeah, that would have been around this sort of time, I guess. Yeah. Or that would have been coming to an end at this
would
time.
Would have thought so.
There you go.
So we'll go on to Deadpool in a minute, because obviously he's who we're covering for X month, Ryanuary. Yeah. But first we'll go on to one of your other favourite characters. Mm-hmm. Gambit's here.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Agent Zero.
Oh,
I'm
no
joking,
one's favourite character.
I don't know who that is.
But no, Gambit is here. He can fly by spinning a staff around his head like a helicopter, and can apparently telekinetically move cards with his mind. You know, just like the comics.
Yep.
He has a sort of Cajun accent when he remembers to do it, and he can fly a plane. All of the things you know and love about Remy LeBeau.
Straight from the comics, that is.
Yep.
Yeah, he has no Cajun charm, no charisma at all. Also, the thing that I don't get about him and Logan is that Logan punches him so he gets knocked out on the ground just before Logan and Sabretooth fight. Mm-hmm. And then literally seconds later, he's like 2 blocks away, running across the roof towards Logan.
Yeah.
Again, just so he can do his spinny, twirly stick jump.
Which, again, not his powers, not levitation via stick. And then later on he does it and blows up the part of the cooling tower. He does it again, but he leaps it must be about 20 metres off the ground.
It was pretty high, just
from a standing position. It's like, well, what are your powers? Again, why does everyone just have the ability to jump really far and be super agile for no apparent reason?
Yeah, they ruined him.
Yeah.
They ruined a lot of characters in this.
I mean, I'm struggling to think of a character they made better. As I say, the fact that will.i.am is probably the most faithful adaptation of a character in this film is not a great sign.
Well, I'm pretty sure his comic counterpart does wear a cowboy hat, so they got that right.
Yeah, exactly right. He had a big belt buckle and he wore a cowboy hat. And that is all I know about John Rake in the comics as well. So we have to get onto him eventually, though. So I'm going to put this in inverted commas, even though you can't see this at home. Deadpool. Yeah.
Right, first of all, I hate it. That's, I do quite like Ryan's portrayal at the start. He's got that sort of the Ryan sort of charm, I guess, and he's the Merc with the mouth.
He plays Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, it's the Merc with the mouth.
He comes on, he plays Ryan Reynolds, and he's got agility powers, and he cuts bullets in half.
Yeah. In the contents of this film, and I don't enjoy saying those words, but I do kind of get the whole idea of Stryker would bond him with other powers, because that would explain how he got the power to heal. So they could have worked that in, and that could have been good. I might be able, if it was just that, and then the blades for arm things, if it was that and the blades, I could kind of forgive the blades out of his arms, because the blades are kind of like his staple weapon in the comics.
Yeah, but not blade arms.
Yeah, but then again, at the end of the film, they could have like had them taken out, and then he could have gone back to swords. So that one I can kind of forgive. But what I can't forgive is the power to teleport, the power to do the optic blasts, and sewing up his mouth.
So, yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, he's played by Ryan Reynolds at the beginning of the film, by Scott Adkins, plays Weapon 11 at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Complete with all of Deadpool's powers, like laser eyes, sword arms, and presumably not having to eat or drink. So...
yeah, could put a tube up his nose.
So, yeah, like you say, it's just... I mean, teleportation was one of Deadpool's things, but it was tech-based. You know, he like swords were. You know, he could teleport around because he had a little personal teleporter.
Interesting.
The same way he could body slide. That was a whole Cable and Deadpool thing. We'll get onto that in 4 weeks' time. But yeah, I mean, other than that, you have Ryan Reynolds basically playing who he played in Blade 3 at the beginning of this film. And then you have a sort of faceless, nameless goon at the end of this film who they gang up and beat up. And that is it.
That was it. Like, really, really bad.
It's kickstarting Ryanuary well, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I was watching this film and I was thinking of a checklist that they must have put together. So, like, it's the classic Wolverine action film kind of list. And what I came up with is Logan running through the woods, check.
Yep.
Happens in several other films.
He shouts.
Screaming at the sky, check, because that happens twice.
Yep.
Cigars, check. He smokes them. That's a Logan thing.
Yeah.
And then walking away from explosions, check.
Oh, that happens all the time. So many terrible CGI explosions, and terrible CGI claws, and terrible CGI everything else.
Yeah.
I don't understand how the claws in this look worse than they did in sort of X1.
Which was 9 years earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
In 9 years, it's got worse.
Yeah. And also, relating this to previous films as well, the adamantium procedure itself, which is such a huge part of Logan's history. It's the subject of Weapon X that we'll be talking about later. It is a defining moment of this character, and it is completely glossed over in this film.
Yeah.
It's about 5 minutes of screen time. It seems really painless non-event. They just show his heart rate going up, and then he jumps up and he slashes at 2 people and runs off.
Yeah.
Which is, first of all, completely different compared to the comics, where it is a torturous event. But even compared to X2, it seemed harder and more painful. The little glimpses we got in that. But here it just seems like such a, and then this happened. And then he jumped on a helicopter and killed Agent X.
Also, they said that he had to volunteer, otherwise his body would reject the adamantium or some bullshit excuse.
None of it made any sense. I mean, it's almost like they looked at the old films, went, okay, they said in X2 that he had volunteered for this procedure, so we have to write that into the plot.
Yeah.
But I don't know why they bothered, because nothing else lined up. So...
yeah. Well, just while we're on the topic of bad CGI, Kate said that it reminded her of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which isn't a great comparison, and that's especially in the bathroom scene where he just
that's
slices up the sink, and plenty of terrible green screen. You can see that throughout the film.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't want to mention it, but I kind of have to, is the creepy Xavier sex doll that turns up at the end.
It's horrible. It's so horrible. It was so
really
smooth. Oh my God, what is wrong with him? Yeah. No, that was terrible.
Yeah. But this film was supposed to kick off a new set of films. They were going to do Origins Magneto, weren't they?
They were, yeah. Which was eventually retooled into X-Men First Class.
Yeah.
Which is why it's sort of a Magneto history. But yeah, they were going to do that, and then this killed it. Yeah.
There you go.
And then everyone largely forgot about it. Much like an adamantium bullet to the head will cause you to do. Unless, of course, you're talking about Logan, in which case it will kill you.
I didn't even write that down.
I love that they made a point of saying, that bullet won't kill him. Yes, but it will give him amnesia, essentially, is what they said. Okay. I don't know how you know that, but all right.
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Please.
Okay, so that's the film covered. We have 2 comics to cover this week. So do you want to go chronologically in order of release or in order of Wolverine's life?
I think we'll do Wolverine's life. It would make sense.
Okay, then let's go with Origin to start with. Then, as I say, written by 3 people, drawn by 2 other people. It is a comic by committee, but what were your thoughts?
I enjoyed it, actually. It was very interesting to... Well, I read this second, so I did Weapon X first and then read this one.
Right.
Which obviously I will comment on to in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I prefer this kind of backstory to not just the film Origins, but the other films, where he's been through so much trauma that he's forgotten his past. It's not been shot in the head or something daft. It's the fact that so much has happened to him, especially when he sort of changes, that his mind says, nope, it's too painful to know what's happened.
Yeah.
Carry on with your life.
Which was always sort of what was implied even before he knew what. And it was always the case that he had undergone such trauma during the Weapon X procedure that he had sort of forgotten everything that had happened before.
Yeah.
And this is really going back. I think they basically wrote this comic as a way... They realised that the films would get around to doing an origin sooner or later.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get in there first. And they wanted to say, right, we're going to do our own origin. Here it is. You know, here's the history of Wolverine. The problem for that for me is I always find that Wolverine is more interesting when he is rooted in mystery.
Yeah.
The most interesting things about him are the fact that he has this sort of mysterious past that even he doesn't know about. So, you know, as we, the reader, learn more about his past, the less interesting he becomes in a way. It's kind of like the Joker thing.
I was literally thinking that, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know what to expect, really, because like I said, I read it second. But then as I was reading it and before I finished issue 2, I didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't sure if Dog Logan, as we'll call him, if Dog Logan would become the Wolverine that we know and kill James Howlett and take his name. I did see the sort of claw scars on Mrs. Howlett's back, and I thought maybe they're from Dog, and her Dog's her real son. These questions were going through my head as I was reading it.
Yeah.
And also the fact that Dog's father is the spitting image of the Wolverine that we know.
Which is the opposite of what we get in the film.
Yeah, a lot of these things were going through my head going, right, I don't quite understand this. But as I was reading it and then getting the answers to these questions, I thought it worked really well as an overall story arc.
Yeah. The comic for me is a little bit too fan servicey, and I'll go back onto that a bit later, but there is at least some subtlety here. You know, in the comic it is heavily implied that the gardener Logan is James Howlett's real dad, hence why he looks exactly like an older Logan, and hence why he keeps talking about Logan's mother and his intense dislike for James's father. But the film, it just outright says it in the opening scene. And that's very much the transition that we get from page to screen in this event, is that whatever subtleties the comic has, which is, there's not a huge amount, you know, it is a bit on the nose, but whatever subtleties it does have, which is that maybe the gardener is Logan's father, even though it obviously is. The first son that they talk about as having died had some sort of mutant abilities as well. You know, this claw thing that she's got the scars on her back. When Wolverine presents his, or when James presents his claws, she says, oh no, not again.
Yeah.
This can't be happening. And then it drives her insane. You know, stuff like that. There's some subtlety. Not all of the blanks are filled in there, unlike the film. But for me, the comic feels a little bit like it's sort of drawing on 40 years of X-Men history and just basically going, hey, you remember Sabretooth? Remember Sabretooth? Well, here's a character. He's a little bit like that. Yeah. Remember Jean Grey? Here's a character that's a little bit like Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Hey, remember how Logan went to Japan and became a samurai? Well, here's a book that someone gives him for no apparent reason that's about samurai.
Yeah.
There's lots of just that. It's just like, here's a little random reference to something, you know, Wolves in particular with the Weapon X storyline that we'll talk about in a bit. You know, they come up a lot, and it's just references to things that happened in Wolverine's life in the history of the comics before this for no apparent reason. It's a bit like a box ticking exercise where they just think, right, well, we haven't included something about this. Okay, that's done. Great. But I mean, overall, it's not a terrible read at all. I don't think it's a bad read. I think if you're interested in the very early days of Wolverine, James Howlett, you could do a lot worse than reading this. But I think it definitely is a time frame that I don't really need to know about as far as Logan goes.
Yeah.
I don't know about, as reading this obviously for the first time, I don't know about if that was your experience though.
Yeah, I'm assuming you've read this before.
I have. Unlike Weapon X, actually. I hadn't read that before. But
No, yeah, I found it really interesting to see the slow transformation from sort of James Howler into Logan into Wolverine.
Yeah.
And even when the newly named Logan, who was a deer in issue 4, the artwork that is used cleverly shows this, and it pretty much calls back to a panel of Dog Logan peeping at someone through the bushes earlier. And that happens again towards the end. So I do like that it's not so much of this happens in issue 1, issue 2, there you go, there's the character that we know and love.
Yeah.
It develops it over time.
Yeah, it definitely develops that character over time. But as I say, I think a lot of those are things that you get from point A to point B via 6 issues, but a lot of those blanks don't really need to be filled in. You know, the fact that he toughens up over time is sort of, you could do that within the space of an issue. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that if it were a film, it would be done in a montage. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, in terms of the other characters, most of them are fairly inconsequential because obviously by the time modern Marvel rolls around, all of these characters pretty much are dead. They do bring back Dog Logan.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you're aware of that. But as a sort of time-travelling, vengeful figure, comics, everyone. But other than that, most of these characters are largely forgotten about.
A part of me thought that Dog Logan would become Sabretooth. As you said, it's a very similar character. Again, I was half expecting there to be some sort of I'm your real brother in this.
Yeah, I mean, he was, reading between the lines, he was his real brother, but yeah.
Again, I think because I watched the film, read Weapon X, then read this. So I had all the other points to think about while I was reading this book. And yeah, I mean, there are some bits that are quite on the nose, but I do kind of like it. There's a bit where Dog's father is telling him that our kind and their kind don't mix, which is clearly a reference to the mutant metaphor, which obviously you've explained in a lot of detail in the past.
In our X-Men episodes last X month, I believe.
If you want to hear more about that, go back and listen to all our X-Men episodes, but not our first one.
Yeah, not the first one. That was bad on it. X-Men 2 in particular, God Loves Man Killed, we talked about that a lot.
Yeah. That was it, yeah. And yeah, like you said, there are things in here you go, oh, so why did he start calling people Bub? So, because that guy at the camp called people Bub.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tick.
It's a tick thing, isn't it? It's kind of like we get with the film. It's like, wait, where did he get that jacket? I need to know. oh, there it is. It's the old dead couple. Thanks. It's a lot of that. It's like, well, we need to just fill in these random things in case someone's wondering where he got a brown and beige jacket from. It was Superman's parents.
Mom, park in. Come down the farm and I'll give you a jacket.
Is that how they spoke?
Northern, there.
Yeah, they're
I don't know.
Yeah.
I went like up north.
I thought you were trying to do a farmer, but you went north.
I was, yeah. And then I went to I was from up north somewhere. Anyway.
The Great White North, perhaps. Okay, with that said, shall we move on to the next stage in our Wolverine's life, which would be the Weapon X program? So, this is Marvel Comics Presents Weapon X by Barry Windsor-Smith from the 1980s. I mean, I was reading this for the first time. You were also, I presume.
Yes.
What were your thoughts?
I mean, it's all right. We'll get into the details in a sec. It's just bloody, gory and mindless violence, really, in my eyes. It was quite a confusing start. It's a little bit all over the place, which I suppose is kind of like Logan's mind, I guess. So they just literally chuck you straight into the story. And I was literally like, I don't know which part to read first because it's all the words everywhere. You're like, I can't follow this. I don't know where to look.
They mostly actually read left, down, and then back up and around, like sort of a U shape.
Yeah, once I settled into the style and the artwork and everything, there were points where your eyes just do start top left and then work anti-clockwise around. And the artwork behind that really helps as well. Yeah, it's just, I think it's a bit of a mess, really, personally. What are your thoughts on it, really?
I loved it.
Yeah?
I really thought it was really very good. I think the disjointed nature of the early story really helps to sort of solidify the confusion of what's going on in Logan's. The story, I mean, I don't know how you read it. You know, these were originally published in Marvel Comics Presents, one of the many anthology comics that Marvel has presented over the years. They massively vary in quality, but as such, this is one of the most well-known things to come out of it.
Yeah.
This story in particular is told in a series of 8-page stories over 12 issues, I think it was, although the 12th issue may have been a full-length one. And as such, I think it's a really interesting read. I think it's, if you're reading on Marvel Unlimited in particular, which is what I was doing, it's a really short, sharp way of reading them. 8 pages, bam, done. And then you get the next chapter, and it is disjointed. So you were reading it in a collected volume, so slightly different, but I just think it's really fantastic. I think the art is excellent. So much of that artwork is so iconic and so intrinsic to what the character is, these things with him covered in these wires and these big helmets and these massive hair, lying on the gurney being tortured. And you notice that Wolverine himself, Logan, doesn't really play a role in this story for the first 6 issues.
Yeah.
You've got this sort of breaking down of the character. It's all told through the visor of the scientists, the 3, the professor, Dr. Whatever his name was, and Beans, or Hines as they called her. Hines was a name, and someone called her Beans at one point. That made me chuckle. But yeah, and it sort of breaks this character down because you're seeing it through the viewpoint of these scientists who are just experimenting on him, and the whole thing is done through their dialogue. So it makes Logan into something other. It makes him into an animal.
Yeah.
He's referred to throughout as a subject, not as a human.
Yeah.
And as such, when he finally, in the last 4 or 5 issues, when he does become the monster that he's talked about, when he breaks free and goes on his rampage that we see in X2, not in X-Men Origins Wolverine, it plays out like a slasher film, or like Alien. He's hunting them through this complex, and they're almost like the protagonists, apart from the fact we've seen them just gradually torture this man for 6 issues preceding it, or 6 8-page stories preceding this. We've seen what they've done to him, and this is retribution for those things. But as I say, it plays out like he's the monster in a monster movie.
They do always come back to, in this and in the Origin comic, they always use the same wording of he's a monster, no, he's an animal.
Yeah.
Which I like, that sort of continuity, I guess, of that same phrase reoccurring.
But that was largely because Origin, obviously, as we said, was drawing from 40 years of Wolverine's history and trying to include as much as possible. And that includes this, which is obviously one of the big building blocks for Wolverine's history. But no, I mean, that thing you said about the early story being quite disjointed, for me, is obviously a purpose decision. In fact, the end of the story is also then ambiguous. It's the end of the story is very disjointed as well, because you get to a resolution and you think, okay, that's the end of the story. Quite a simplistic one. You know, he goes on a rampage, he kills everyone, the end. But then you get the other issue. You get the other issue where it casts that all in doubt. In fact, because we've seen glimpses of it earlier in the storyline where they had been viewing Wolverine's mindset on a big screen, and they saw him dreaming about killing the professor. Not Professor X, the professor. And, you know, so he was obviously having those dreams on a loop in his head. And so we see one play out in real time as if it is the truth. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, oh no, we're back again.
Yeah, that's the bit that got me, because I didn't care for it. It was all a dream-esque kind of ending. I know it was a simulation, and I get why it happened. Yeah. And the actual ending, where he sort of takes down that door or that wall and comes in, I like that it did stop there.
It loops again. But then there's still the doubt of whether that is what is true, whether that is the real thing, or if that's another simulation. And that's what I liked. And this is what we're saying about, the more you know about Wolverine's history, the less interesting he becomes. The fact that he doesn't even know the truth is what's interesting. And so much of this comic is about manipulating his mind and torturing him to do what they want him to do, to become a weapon. That the fact that the comic book leaves it ambiguous as well as to the actual truth, I really liked that, because at no point were you seeing it through Wolverine's eyes, really, except for that last issue where you have the recursion, you have the we're back to him
what feels
breaking
like
out
real life.
Yeah. But even then, there's no guarantee.
I did like you mentioned the artwork there a while ago. Yeah. The artwork is really good. There was points of it that I wasn't really reading it. I was just paying attention to the artwork, which does the same job. Yeah. It's not as forced with the writing as earlier comics were, like the old sort of 60s kind of way of it.
Well, not even that, not even 60s. The ones we were reading before were 80s comics. 80s, so they were similar eras as this.
So I was glad that wasn't included going, and then this happened because it always happens. See issue 22 to find out more. You know, I was glad that wasn't in there, and it was its own kind of arc. Yeah.
I think it helps that Barry Windsor-Smith was doing both writing and drawing, so I think he had a lot more trust in the art to tell the story. He doesn't feel the need to stick a box on there saying, and then Wolverine extended his claws and killed someone. He can just draw that, and he's confident that gets the point across.
I'm actually pretty impressed. Like, I know we're not going to cover this film because, well, you'll know why when I say it. I'm pretty impressed about how X-Men Dark Phoenix got the Weapon X look so damn close. Yeah. I think that's the only good thing about that film is the comparison to his look in this comic as it was on screen. And obviously the reason why we won't be covering that is because we've already covered Dark Phoenix for X-Men 2.
X-Men 3.
X-Men 3. I would rather not watch Dark Phoenix again, if I'm honest.
It's odd, though, because, again, that is another continuity thing where it's obviously Weapon X, but it's completely different to the Weapon X we get presented in this film, is the one we see in Dark Phoenix. So,
and also X-Men 2.
Yeah, they've got 3 different Weapon X's here. But yeah, I know what you mean. We probably won't cover Dark Phoenix for many, many reasons. But yeah, they at least managed to replicate the aesthetic value of Wolverine in his Weapon X get-up.
Yeah. I mean, once I settled into it and I got used to the sort of craziness of the way that it's portrayed, I did enjoy it. I just came away a little bit, like, all right. Fair enough. Like, I enjoyed the artwork and I enjoyed the journey, but the simulation part of it, I just didn't really care for. I was like, that kind of sucks because that was kind of cool. And then you go, it's all a dream.
But do you not think that the journey is what is important with an origin story? Because we already know the destination. The destination is that he ends up on the X-Men in the present day.
And he becomes Hugh Jackman.
He does. He becomes Hugh Jackman. He grows a few inches. But no, the point being that, we know he ends up on the X-Men, but seeing a glimpse of his life, the story being told there, it to me is more important than how it begins or ends in a way.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, as I say, reading for this for the first time, I really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's, this really good blend of art and storytelling in a way that wasn't typical for comics of the time and is not even really typical of comics nowadays. Yeah. It's a very almost experimental in terms of the storytelling techniques.
Just like Wolverine.
It keeps a lot of things ambiguous. Yes.
Experimental.
Well done.
Something that I was surprised to find out, or to not read about, if you will, was the lack of William Stryker. Because I've not read any of Wolverine's sort of past, if you will.
No.
And obviously Stryker appears in not one but 2 X-Men films.
He does indeed.
So I thought that he would have been in the comics, which probably is, and I'm assuming you've got some information on Stryker.
We have read it. You and I have read it. It's God Loves, Man Kills in X-Men 2.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
In the comic books, he is a preacher, a religious leader, not a military man. He is a man who extols the virtues of humanity over mutants and leads the Purifiers. He has no connection, as far as I know, unless it was added later, to the Weapon X program.
To be fair, that was a year ago that we read that. A lot has happened in this last year.
It's been a big year, isn't it? Well, a lot and not much at all. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would read it. I mean, it's not terrible.
We'll come back to that later, whether whether you'd recommend it and what order and whatnot in our outro. But first, we have to get on to Iain's egg hunt. Have you got much for us this week?
Yeah, got a couple of things.
Couple of eggs.
Easter eggs and things that I've seen.
Okay. That's classic. All right, let's do this then. Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt. Iain's egg hunt.
I'm not yoking you. Right, so we have always said that the makers behind the movie think that Wolverine is a wolf.
Yes.
Or a type of wolf.
Yes. This film in particular, he even said about a Wolverine howling at the moon.
Yeah, that's how he got his name, was because there was a wolf and a moon and they were in love and...
Yeah.
I don't know, some sort of shit. But in the early scenes in Logan's bedroom, there's actually artwork of an actual Wolverine, not a wolf. So I do like that they clearly know what a Wolverine is.
Well, someone
because
does.
They put the artwork on the back wall, But then they still gone, oh yeah, he can howl like a wolf.
Yeah, but I swear it was like Silver Fox told a story about the Wolverine howling at the moon. I was like, Wolverines don't howl at a moon. They're like badgers. Why would they howl at a moon?
Which they do actually bring that up in the Origins comic. They say, he'll go at it like a Wolverine.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, because they would dig and dig and dig and
go for what they're like savage little, short, hairy, savage things. They're like badgers or honey badgers. They're aggressive little bastards. But obviously, Hugh Jackman isn't a little guy either, so that sort of breaks the relationship between him and a Wolverine another stage. But anyway.
But yeah, like you know, and like the listeners know, I do like to mention any cameos that I can pick out. Unfortunately, no Stan Lee cameo, even though he was an executive producer.
Yeah, he wasn't in this one, was he? But I suppose he didn't create the character, did he? So
yeah. But one of the poker players playing with Gambit is Daniel Negreanu, who is actually a professional poker player.
No, okay.
So that was quite nice. They included someone who actually knows how to play poker.
Yep.
In a scene that was pointless.
And
a film that was pointless.
Yeah. And Gambit was beating him at poker with his weird hand tricks where he could move cards around.
I assume he was cheating. He could probably change cards from aces, from twos to aces or something.
I mean, he seemed to have basic card-based powers, which were sort of moving them with his mind, so I assume it was very easy for him to cheat.
And the old farmer couple that we mentioned, they're not called Ma and Pa Kent. They are called James and Heather Hudson. And in the comics, they are the founding members of a group called Alpha Flight.
They are.
So James is Guardian and Heather is Vindicator.
Yes. And obviously neither of them are old.
Or alive anymore.
Well, yeah, there's that. I mean,
in the film.
Yeah, they are not an old farmer couple. They are superheroes, which again is just shows how...
That was name only.
Yeah, literally just, here you go. There's Heather Hudson. Hold on, that's not... All right, well, someone read a blurb about Wolverine and said, it says here there's something to do with Heather Hudson. Are you going to read the sentence that's to do with that? Nah, Heather Hudson, that's the name of a character.
Yeah.
Yeah, took him in when his spacecraft crashed on Earth.
And this isn't a real one, and I'll explain why. There's a whole bunch of captured mutants in this with various powers, but their names aren't said. So it could just be people with similar powers to the ones that we know.
Yes.
Kind of like, I think it might have been Logan with those kids. We were saying about who had whose powers.
Yeah.
Other films as well. But there was people like Toad, Quicksilver, Banshee, and Riptide.
Yes.
Again, that's just by looking at them and going, he seems quick. That could be Quicksilver. He seems like he can control wind. That's probably Riptide.
Yeah.
He looks like a frog. That's probably Toad. You know, it's just kind of, that could be that character, but it's probably not.
I liked that they did the classic shorthand for mutants, which is when you saw a group of people, they just dyed some of their hair. And they were like, this one's got blue hair. Oh, mutant. It's like, oh. Or they just got some hair dye, but okay.
Yeah. And something that I saw in the comic in Origins, just want to do a little shout out to our town, because the docks of Southampton get a mention in issue 5 of Origin.
Oh, yeah, I glossed over that. Okay.
Not an Easter egg again, something that I just saw. So I just thought I would give that a shout out.
Represent.
So that and Tony Temper's song are the only two things I can think of that says Southampton.
I'm sure there's got to be more. I mean, it's Titanic.
Yeah.
That's quite a big one. They filmed a scene there at the Grapes.
Yeah, there you go. As I said, not much because I didn't want to spend too long. It's pointless.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'm glad you're so honest with that. Well, in that case, shall we get back to the conclusion? So, what were your thoughts on the film, which I think I know the answer to, the 2 comics, and, would you recommend them? What order? What are your thoughts?
The film, I mean, it's still pretty bad. I had a memory of it being terrible, and I was pretty right. Maybe not as terrible as I thought it was, but still pretty bad. Just overall bland, boring. There are points that I enjoyed, and the points that I enjoyed were probably when Ryan Reynolds was in it at the start.
That 5 minutes.
Yeah, and the portrayal done by Hugh Jackman, I say it's still pretty good. It's just what he's been given to work with is terrible.
Yeah, I like Hugh Jackman, and I get that people are very enthusiastic about his casting, but I've always been of the view that, to be honest, there are a million other people who could play that role.
Yeah.
And they would do it just as well. I don't see the whole, this is the only person who's right for this job, that a lot of people seem to get with Hugh Jackman. I think he's good in the role, but I don't think he's definitive as some other characters.
Your thoughts on the film?
It's crap.
Fair enough.
Absolute shit. I mean, I thought it was crap at the time. I think it's even more crap now. I think you compare it to films that came out at around the same time. It's still crap. I mean, I think it came out the same year as Thor, which is better, but not great, but still decent. And then it also came out, as I say, a year after Dark Knight and Iron Man. And you think, what the hell was going on? It's one of the weakest, possibly the second weakest X-Men film. And that is from a very, very low scoring film franchise in general.
I do know that it's not an X-Men film, but would you rather watch this or watch Green Lantern?
Well, these are, I think I'm right in saying, so far we've been doing this 34 episodes now of this podcast. I think I have given 4 films 1 star on Letterboxd out of these, and those are Green Lantern, X-Men Origins Wolverine, Whiteout, which we covered a few weeks back.
The League?
And The League of Extraordinary
Gentlemen.
There is. Yes, it is. And yeah, I mean, it's very much choosing between 2 very unfortunate outcomes. So I think if I was given a choice between Green Lantern and X-Men Origins Wolverine, I would choose to just gouge my own eyes out with some CGI claws.
I knew you'd take the easy route out. It's easier to gouge your eyes out than it is to watch either of these films. Yeah, anyway.
I think this one's shorter. Let's go with this one.
Anyway, comics. Okay. So... Obviously, I was reading both for the first time, you were reading one for the first time. I would say overall, I preferred Origin over Weapon X. Okay. I'm glad I read it, but I'm not going to be going back to it anytime soon.
I mean, I'm going to go the opposite route. I prefer Weapon X massively over Origin. I don't mind Origin. I think it's a perfectly functional comic book. But I think Weapon X, you think so much of what Wolverine became and what Wolverine is came from this one comic, Weapon X. If this comic did not exist, none of these films, basically none of this character would exist without it.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, a really interesting method of telling a story that is very different from other things that were happening in comics at that time. So, yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed Weapon X. Maybe it was just because I'm reading it for the first time and it was a nice surprise, but, well, not really a surprise. It's a well-regarded comic book, but yeah.
What happened to Wolverine? Oh my God.
But an Origin I think is fine. I think it's okay. But, you know, I really liked Weapon X. And I would say if you're going to do any of these things, I would put them in order of Weapon X Origin and then X-Men Origins Wolverine. I would perhaps include, I don't know, staring at a blank wall for 45 hours between Origin and X-Men Origins or something like that.
45 hours? That's a long time.
I mean, a long time to be staring at a wall. And I mean consecutive. If you can't do it for 45 hours, you've got to start again. What about you? Would you recommend them? What order? You know, that sort of thing.
I would recommend both comics. Like I said, Weapon X is not my kind of bag. A little bit all over the place, but I'm glad I read it. But you preferred it over me, so everyone has their own opinions. The film, I definitely wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to have some laughs when it's clearly not a funny film, put it on. But
Watch a comedy. If you want to have some laughs, watch a comedy.
Yeah, all that. I mean, the only reason why I would advise someone to watch it is to say, you've not seen it, you don't know how terrible it is, go and watch it to find how terrible it is.
Yeah, fair enough. And what was Kate's opinion of the film?
So, she said that nothing was that bad, but everything could have been better.
That's fair enough.
I mean, yeah, we're watching this with obviously the comics in mind and being comic fans.
Yeah.
Not a huge comic fan. She's read a couple bits here and there. But as a film overall, we both said it was boring as well.
I didn't specifically ask Hayley her opinion, but her opinion was more or less, she sort of laughed and said it was crap. I mean, that was about as far as we got. And I would say that she doesn't know a lot about the comic books either in this regard. Yeah. So, yeah. But that's fair enough.
I think because when we watch it and we kind of go, oh, what have they done to Blob? God's sake kind of thing. She doesn't know this, so she's like, oh, look, he's got fat. Like,
look at the funny fat guy. Let's laugh at fat people.
Yeah, something that actually I didn't actually say earlier on is that comic book films don't have to be cartoony. And in this, there is huge amounts of cartoony moments that just don't work, and don't know why they put it in there with that fight with him and Blob.
It's just, the thing is, it's not fun.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, you can overlook a lot of problems with a film as long as the overall film is fun.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of our favourite comic books films we both talked about is Scott Pilgrim, for instance, which is highly cartoony. It does have its flaws in terms of pacing and things like that, but because the film overall is just really fun, you overlook some of the smaller problems with it. Whereas because this film is such a chore, you end up watching it and going, oh God, what is that? What's happened to that? And you end up picking up on all this crap because you're not enjoying the film overall.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that's enough about X-Men Origins Wolverine. Have you got any other business for this week?
Yes. So obviously last year we did a bonus episode of New Year's New News, or the New Year's New whatever.
It's something like that.
And we mentioned it last episode, but I think we should cover Doctor Who Flux in a section that I will call New Year's New Who, or New Year's Who News. Up to you.
Or New Who's News.
Or Who's Years Who's.
Or Horton hears a Doctor Who's news.
Doctor Who got any blues clues? Let's ask her.
So this is basically a segment we're going to talk about Doctor Who Flux, is that right? Because we've mentioned it a few times on the show of late. We're not going to go on about it. If you've not seen it before and you don't know what Doctor Who is, you may just want to switch off now. But no, you should probably keep listening.
I would say if you've not finished it, then things that I'm going to say will be a bit spoilery. So
okay.
If you've not watched it, or you plan to watch it or not watch all of it yet, just turn off now and come back when you have.
I'll put some chapter markers in or something if you want to skip it.
Yeah, I mean, the first few episodes to me were pretty good, and it was building towards something huge. But it was a bit of a letdown, or not just a bit, it's a huge...
It was a massive letdown.
Yeah.
It was such a disappointing ending.
I'd say the first sort of 2 episodes were pretty good, and I kind of liked the reintroduction of older characters again. Even though they sort of came and went, like the Angels episode, they were obviously in the episode quite a lot.
Yeah.
Same with the Sontarans. I think it was the Daleks and the Cybermen just sort of just turned up and then fucked off.
Yeah, pretty much. I thought episodes was 2 and 4, the one where they went to the Crimean War, and the one with the Angels in the Village. I think those were really, really, like, just as far as standalone episodes of Doctor Who goes, they were really good.
Yeah. This is my problem with Chris Chibnall, is that he bites off more than he can chew, or he literally carves his name into the Doctor Who lore. And it's like, Chris, calm down. Like, what are you doing? I know there was the whole War Doctor and the Time War and everything like that.
Yeah.
But that was started by Russell T Davies and then carried on by Stephen Moffat, yeah. So because you had two people doing that and over a few years, it worked. This one, Chris has just turned up and gone, right, this is now lore, I'm changing it all.
He did that with his series as well, though, didn't he? The 3 series that preceded it. I mean, whatever you think of the Timeless Child arc, I do think it's a strange thing to go back to a 60-year history and try and rewrite everything that came before it.
Yeah.
Like you say, the War Doctor is a bit of a different circumstance because, I mean, it only came about 5 years ago, whenever the 50th anniversary was.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're adjusting years of lore. It's 5 years ago, and then it covered that gap in between the 2 Who series.
The film and the new Who.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't mind that so much, but I always find it strange when you want to go back and really like hammer home things about like the original Doctor Who and try and change the whole mythos. And Russell T Davies did it when he brought it back. He killed off all the Time Lords and he destroyed Gallifrey and he really shook up the status quo. But that wasn't changing history.
Yeah.
That was adding to the lore. That was a continuation. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, I just thought he was building up to something during this series and I was quite enjoying it. As I say, there was a couple of really good episodes. There was a couple of solid episodes. There was one weaker episode in there. I can't remember which one it was.
The third, probably.
Possibly, yeah. And it was really building up for something. And then the 6th episode.
Yeah, the last one.
Was just crap. And it just sort of ended.
Yeah.
And it went, oh, that's finished, is it? I'm confused about what the state of the universe is.
Yeah.
Well, who's doing what and why? I don't know what the point of half of these characters was.
Yeah.
I don't know why the Doctor apparently now doesn't care that she's just watched 3 different races essentially get genocided in front of her eyes by the Flux. I know they're her enemies, but she's always been, as a character, historically quite empathetic and would not be the first to be like... It was always like my first instinct isn't to kill, but I will if necessary.
Yeah.
Whereas this just seemed to be 3 huge armies of people just died in front of me. Shall we get on with the TARDIS? I know that you liked Dan, was his name?
Yeah, Dan.
I didn't really care for him. Didn't understand his character. Literally couldn't understand him at times. When the music swells and they're all shouting at each other, and I was like, so what are you saying?
I liked his character at the start, and I liked how they introduced him, and just him as a character overall. That was in the first couple of episodes. By episode 3 and 4, it was just the comic relief and over-the-top idiot, and... I know the companions have always been the viewers in a way that they ask the questions that we're asking. But it was just so many questions and over-the-topness. And then when him and Yaz and that older guy travel around the world in 1905 or whatever it is, it was just, what are you doing? Like, really? Like,
Yeah. And it also did one of my least favourite tropes with things, which is when you have a character say how great another character is, instead of showing that character being great. So instead of showing a character being really good, and making the audience go, oh, wow, what a cool character, they have a third character go, man, Yaz was amazing. Yaz was absolutely brilliant. Everyone should love Yaz. Yaz, what a great girl. And you're like, yeah, but that'd be really nice if we could have seen some of that and drawn our own conclusions rather than just believing you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Yaz, of the 3 companions that came before, I think she was possibly a favourite. I thought old Bradley.
Oh, I did like him. I did like Bradley.
He was all right, but he was a bit of a Bernard Cribbins, is that I thought he worked well as a one-off or a little bit, but not necessarily as a permanent companion.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Yaz has been pretty good. She's a solid companion. I do wish we would get away from 21st century companions and 21st century Britain in general a little bit more. You think you go back to old Who and they had people from the far-flung future, Captain Jax as well, but they also had, Jamie from the second Doctor's time, who was a Scottish laird. He used to go around with his bloody greatsword. If there was a bit of ruckus, he'd be like, right, I'm going to draw my sword and attack it. And it's like, no, Jamie, don't do it.
Stop, calm down.
And it's nice to have that sort of fish out of water, because it's, we're looking at this, like you say, we're the viewer's perspective. So you've got modern day people going around the Doctor and being a bit confused. But I liked the idea that you had an even more historic character who, if he came to modern day Britain, was like, what the hell is this? It's a phone.
So he's got a reason to be like, what the hell is that? And you go, like you said, oh, that's just a phone. Something that we would see and not even have to ask.
Exactly.
But that's kind of what Dan became, was asking the dumb questions of, oh, where are we? We're in Egypt now, Dan. you know that because we've obviously had to travel here.
Yeah.
But yeah, my sort of main issue with this overall season, if we're calling it that, or series, is the cliffhangers. The cliffhangers on a few of them were actually pretty damn good. I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
But then they were solved like
immediately.
Like that.
Yeah.
Just trying to click there, but that was too quiet. But yeah, so i.e. the Doctor becoming an angel.
Yep.
I was shocked by that. I was like, oh my God, what's just happened? And that was resolved within the first couple of minutes.
Yeah,
that was it.
My favourite one of those was in the 5th episode going into the 6th.
Yep.
The weird skull people were coming towards her. The swarm were going to dematerialise her, and it cuts away and it goes to the end.
Oh my God, what's going to happen?
And the next episode, that's resolved by her ducking slightly.
Yeah, and she moves sideways.
Yeah. It's like, oh, big cliffhanger. Oh, I should just move. Yeah, that's a good idea, Doctor. Well done.
It's just bonkers. For some reason, I had it in my head when I was watching this that this was her last season.
No, yeah, she's got 3 specials to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. For some reason, I either didn't know that or I completely wiped that from mind. But I thought that she was going to regenerate at the end of the 6th one, and I thought that would be quite a good thing. You know, in retrospect, she could have stopped the flux, reversed all of what it's done, and then had to regenerate. So that would have made sense.
Yeah.
So the end of it, when it didn't happen, and it just sort of like, oh, that big black guy who's got the sort of whatever he was,
the passenger
guy. Yeah. He absorbed it. There you are, done.
Yeah.
She stopped it, but not fixed it, and then they just went off.
No, she hasn't fixed it. And this is what I mean. It was like destroying. I got the impression it pretty much destroyed all of the universe.
Yeah.
Apart from Earth. But then it was just like, oh, no, still loads of universe left. I mean, I know that you saw the characters earlier in the series hopping planet to planet and stuff like that. And so you knew there was other planet survivors out there. But the whole universe is in disarray. I don't know. I just feel that it was thrown a lot in there, a lot of ideas that would have been really good if they had all paid off, but then none of them did.
Yeah.
And so it ends up with a really unsatisfying series overall, even though some of those episodes were really good.
Yeah. It was supposed to be 10 episodes and then 8 and then obviously 6. That was due to the COVID times.
Oh, yeah, that thing.
You know that thing that's going around the world still?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was just very, very rushed. The only good thing about it, like you said, is a couple episodes that are good, and the way that they brought back the angels and they made them not shit.
Yeah.
When the angels first came around, they were really, really good, and they were overused in Moffat times.
Yeah. Although Moffat created the angels, so he's allowed to overuse them.
Yeah, but I think he overused them, and then they just got worse over time.
Yeah. What annoyed me is, again, the Sontarans is that they tried to pose them as this real credible threat, and the Crimean stuff was really good. And then they had them back in the current day, and then they had all that bullshit with him eating chocolate in a shop, with being hit in the back of a neck with a pan, without being able to hit anything with their guns whatsoever. They're meant to be this warrior race that, you know, is so formidable. And then there's literally 3 people running down a straight road in front of them, and 3 of Sontarans or whatever couldn't shoot them.
Yeah.
And then they got hit in the back of the heads.
That was a little bit of the Stormtrooper syndrome there.
It is, but the Stormtroopers were never the primary antagonist. You can't try and make something your primary antagonist whilst also making them shit. You've got to make them a credible threat. This whole series, the only thing that was killed off was the pirate from Pirates of the Caribbean, who I can't remember his name, the old professor guy.
Yeah. Professor Oldman.
Professor Oldman. Yeah, he was the only one that was killed off during this whole series, and he was quite a nice character, and then he dies for no apparent reason, as if it's like just a way of showing some stakes. But there aren't any stakes, because you only introduced this character 3 episodes ago, and he died for no reason whatsoever, and it didn't accomplish anything.
Oh, and also, I'm not sure if you realised, but the clairvoyant was called Claire.
I got that, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
Yeah, funny stuff.
Thanks, Chibnall. Anyway, there you go.
I feel like we've been down on it. There were a couple of episodes. Anyway, moving on. I'm looking forward to the specials, and I'm looking forward to Russell T Davies coming back.
Oh, yes, me too.
Which I didn't think I'd say. Towards the end of Russell T Davies's era, I couldn't wait for him to leave. But
anyway, that's enough out of us. So
I think so. We've gone off on a Doctor Who rant long enough, and I think it's time to wrap this episode, which is supposedly the first episode of X month, by saying that is all for this week. Thank you once again for joining us. Happy New Year to you all. And if you want to get in touch, you can reach us at all the social media whatnots, including Twitter at becometheteapot, or via email at becometheteapot@hotmail.com.
And you can also follow me at Papa Joz if you want to find out what I'm doing.
No one does. Right. Join us next episode as we'll be jumping ahead 7 years to Deadpool's second outing on the big screen in his self-titled 2016 movie, Deadpool. In order to get to grips with the character, we'll be skipping over his largely unrecognisable earliest appearances and going straight to the first 11 issues of Joe Kelly's iconic Deadpool run. I haven't actually written an outro, so now I'm in trouble. What are we going to write?
Maximum effort. Just cut it there.
Okay. Cool. Works well. Let's hit stop. Bam.
Oh, you're so funny, Logan.